Afternoon. Bill S6, along the lines and what our government's platform has been and what our agenda has been over 3.5 years, obviously fits well within our treatment for tax treaties, working with our international partners and international organizations. It's a routine bill, a routine bill that we need to have implemented, a routine tax convention. But Mr. Speaker, if I may take a step back in terms of what our government has done over the last 3 years with regards to improving our tax system, investing in CRA, investing in middle-class Canadians. And, yesterday we had Canadian Statistics Canada, report to us on the annual Canadian Income Survey 2017. And as an economist by training, as someone who reads the daily notices from Statistics Canada, it was really wonderful to see this report come out. It was wonderful to know that the work that we've been doing for 3 years, not only the 900,000 jobs that have been created by hardworking Canadians and Canadian entrepreneurs, but also that the growth that's occurring is inclusive. And the growth that is occurring is widespread and benefiting Canadian families from coast to coast to coast, including those families and their children in my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge. It was great to see that nearly over 850,000 Canadians have been lifted out of poverty. And in our platform 3 years ago, we based that on the Canada Child Benefit, which benefits 9 out of 10 Canadians and is tax-free, simple, and monthly. We based that on cutting taxes for 9 million middle-class Canadians, which benefits them and their families. And we also asked the 1% of Canadians, the wealthiest in our country, the most fortunate, just to pay a little bit more. And now we see the fruits of those results, and that is lifting hundreds of thousands of Canadians and their families out of poverty. And we ran on a platform where we said we would strengthen the middle class and help those working very hard to join the middle class. And Mr. Speaker, I'm great to say that we're getting there. We've seen our poverty rate now go down significantly, decline significantly. We know we have more work to do. We've seen tens of thousands of seniors now being lifted out of poverty. We know we have more work to do. And that 10% increase in the guaranteed income supplement to our most vulnerable seniors, I know is benefiting my riding and the seniors, the 17,810 seniors that, according to Stats Can, live in my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge. I know 1,530 of the most vulnerable seniors in my riding received, on average, $800 more every year from the increase in the guaranteed income supplement, the 10% increase that we campaigned on, that we promised, and that we implemented. And I look at this Canada-Madagascar Tax Convention Bill, Loi S6, and I look at this as another step forward in improving our tax treaties with our partners, but also building a stronger Canada with its international partners and ensuring that all Canadians pay their fair share in taxes, and that all Canadians can depend on the services that we as a government deliver. And I say we, I say all members of Parliament. Over the past 3 years, we have taken action on multiple fronts to ensure that this happens. Because when everyone pays their fair share, the government can continue to deliver the programs and services that Canadians need while keeping taxes low for middle-class families. Again, I allude to the fact that we cut taxes for 9 million Canadians, as we promised, promise made, promise kept at the onset. As you know, Mr. Speaker, one of the government's first actions was to cut taxes for middle-class Canadians. Over 9 million Canadians are now benefiting from this change. Nearly $20 billion over 5 years of tax relief to families from coast to coast to coast. And to help pay for this middle-class tax cut, we asked the wealthiest to pay a little bit more. Next, we made changes to better provide targeted, more generous, and simpler support for Canadian families with children. We accomplished this with the introduction of the Canada Child Benefit, or CCCB, which is implemented proudly on July 31st, 2016. I know in my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge, and looking at the number, for one of the time periods, over 16,000, nearly 17,000 children benefited 9,510 payments were made on a monthly basis were for nearly $5 million. And Mr. Speaker, if I look quickly at the numbers for the year, I see that nearly $57 million in the Canada Child Benefit was paid out to families in Vaughan Woodbridge. That is incredible. That is lifting families and their children out of poverty. That is helping families save for a rainy day, pay for their kids' winter boots. As I understand it is a snow day back home in Vaughan Woodbridge, and that the buses were cancelled, so it is a snow day. And if those funds that I paid for those kids to have an extra pair of boots or a new pair of boots, then I'm proud of that. The CCB is particularly helpful for families led by single parents. These are the families most often led by single mothers who tend to have lower total incomes. In fact, close to 95% of CCB amounts paid to single parents with incomes below $30,450 are paid to single mothers. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to ensuring that Canada's tax system is fair, effective, and competitive. I am certain that all honourable members know how important small businesses are to Canada's economy. They account for 70% of all private sector jobs and are vital drivers of economic growth in communities all across the country. In looking at Bill S6 and this tax convention with Madagascar, this is another entry or tax treaty that's made for the benefit of businesses on both sides of the border, in both sides of, in this case, on both sides of the Atlantic. And we need to know that we are, as a country, eliminating barriers to investment, eliminating barriers to trade, and we've done that with CETA, the implementation of CETA, and implementation of CPTPP, and most recently the newly signed USMCA accord with the United States and Mexico, our two largest trading partners. And this is about creating good middle-class jobs, growing the economy, and growing the economy in an inclusive manner that benefits all Canadians and all middle-class Canadians, and yes, those working very hard to join it. When small businesses succeed, Canada succeeds. That is why the government reduced the small business tax rate to 10% in January 2018, with a further reduction to 9% coming on January 1st, 2019. These low tax rates will enable small businesses to create good, well-paying jobs in communities across Canada. And we know, Mr. Speaker, that the best poverty reduction plan is a job, is giving Canadians skills training and lifelong learning. And Canadians, hardworking Canadians, entrepreneurs, such as the 13,000 small business owners in my riding, or in the city of Vaughan, and a number of thousand in my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge, have created over 900,000 jobs, or approximately 900,000 jobs, in Canada since we were first elected. Our unemployment rate hit around a 5.4%, I think it's at 5.6%, because people are being drawn into the labour market. A 40-year low in unemployment rate, something that we should be proud of. We know there's more work to do, but the fact is that there's over 500,000 job openings in Canada currently. The fact is that people from all over around the world want to come, move, work, and invest in our country. And there's a reason for that. We have the best entrepreneurs, we have one of the best educational systems in the world, and we're a great place to invest. And we have access through 3 major trade deals to all our major trading partners. I think it's over 1.6 billion people where we have free trade access to, and businesses across the world know this. These low tax rates will enable small businesses to create good, well-paying jobs in communities across Canada. When we say we expect these results from small business tax cuts, Mr. Speaker, it's because we have a track record of success, giving us confidence in the direction we're headed. Many positive signs that tell us our plan is working. Since 2016, hardworking Canadians have created, as I said to reemphasize, hundreds of thousands of jobs, pushing the unemployment rate to a 40-year low and giving Canada one of the strongest records of economic growth in the G7. Yes, Mr. Speaker, in the G7. Canadian workers are experiencing the strongest wage growth in a decade, and we've seen some of the numbers come out yesterday from the Canadian Income Survey, where after 2 years of stagnation, wages are on the rise, incomes are on the rise, and that's more money in the pockets of Canadians, whether you're low income or middle class or upper class. That is a good news story because it's more income to invest, it's more income to save for you and your family. And most importantly, I would argue, Mr. Speaker, because as we look around the world and we look at the finances of governments around the world, The flexibility that we've had in Canada to invest in Canadians, invest not only in skills training, invest not only through the Canada Child Benefit, but also invest in infrastructure through a 180 billion, 12-year infrastructure plan, where we've sat down at the tables with our municipal partners, our regional partners, and our provincial partners, where we've sat down and worked on both the urban side and rural Canada, where we've invested funds in both broadband and in public transit. That is due to the inherent flexibility in our fiscal strength in Canada, where we can make these investments, we can plan for the long term. Canada's net debt to GDP ratio is the lowest among all G7 countries, and we intend to maintain that, and we intend to bring it down over the medium and long term. But we understand, as Canadians do, that more needs to be done to encourage long-term economic growth. As I said earlier, one of the things we need to do is ensure that everyone pays his or her fair share of taxes. It is not acceptable that some corporations, both foreign-owned and Canadian, take advantage of tax rules, Canada's tax rules, to avoid tax. It is unacceptable that some wealthy people use offshore jurisdictions to hide income and evade tax. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to re-emphasize that we, as a government, since taking office, have invested nearly $1 billion in CRA to provide them the resources after, I would frankly say, a number of years where the prior government cut services, cut funding to agencies like CRA, did not allow them to have the tools to do their job effectively. We have reversed that. And Canadians understand that, and they appreciate that, because the quality of our services are delivered and funded through taxpayers, and we respect them as a government. We've lowered taxes for 9 million Canadians, but we've also asked the wealthiest 1% to pay a little bit more, and those that attempt to avoid paying their fair share need to be held accountable. We've introduced base erosion profit shifting, which was recently debated in the House and I had the pleasure of speaking to, in working with our multinational partners to look at ways that we can improve transfer pricing for corporations, make sure strengthen our exchange of information with our multilateral partners, and provide the tools to CRA to do their job effectively. Because we need to ensure that corporations and wealthy individuals continue to pay their fair share of taxes, and that our tax laws are being enforced judiciously, diligently, and effectively. In order to stop this from happening, Mr. Speaker, the Canada Revenue Agency needs information from foreign jurisdictions. That's why the tax convention in this bill puts in place measures to make the exchange of tax information possible from one of our countries to the other. Bill S6 will help Canadian tax authorities prevent international tax evasion while gathering information they need to enforce our tax laws. Canada's network of 93 income tax treaties currently in force is one of the largest in the world. However, we must keep updating and expanding this network in order to encourage international trade and make it easier for other countries to invest in Canada. In this way, getting our tax treaties in order will help the Canadian economy and Canadian businesses compete globally, enable them to hire, to invest, and to grow our economy, and to improve the future of middle-class Canadians and those, for example, living in my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge. Bill S6 gives Canadians more certainty about the tax implications involved in doing business with, working in, or investing in Madagascar. This bill will make our tax system more efficient, while also ensuring tax fairness for Canadians who already pay their fair share, in order to encourage more foreign investment in Canada, remove barriers to international trade, and help grow and strengthen the middle class across the country. I encourage all members to support this bill. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude my remarks on Bill S6 and act to implement the convention between Canada and the Republic of Madagascar for the avoidance of double taxation, I look at this bill, and much like I believe it was Bill C-82 on base erosion profit shifting, much like the work we've done on the Committee of Finance on a study with regards to tax avoidance and tax evasion that was done very judiciously by the Finance Committee. And it's great to see committees doing the work that they are tasked to do independently, to do the work judiciously, and to make the recommendations and produce those reports that are then looked at both externally and internally by ministers. And on this issue of a tax convention and implementation thereof, it's obviously very important for Canada as a country to work with all its international partners, no matter how big or small, no matter near or far, to ensure that we have the proper information, the exchange between the two entities, that we, on a technical basis, ensure that we eliminate double taxation between two countries and the individuals investing on both ways, that we reduce the risk of burdensome taxation, ensure that taxpayers are not subject to discriminatory taxation. Mr. Speaker, in closing, by strengthening our ties with Madagascar, our government is seeking out the kind of investment and trade opportunities that are vital to grow the economy. I've spoken about the treaties that we put in place, whether it's on the trade front, CETA, CPTPP, and USMCA. I've spoken to our plan to grow the economy by lowering taxes for middle-class Canadians, asking the 1% to pay a little more, and the results are bearing fruit with the numbers that were produced yesterday by Statistics Canada, in which over 850,000 Canadians have been lifted out of poverty in the last 2.5 years. And those are real people working hard every day to provide for a better future for themselves and their family. And we as a government will continue to invest in them, believe in them, and work with them, and work with all our partners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very disconcerted by my Liberal colleague's speech today here, because Canadians understand that all is not well, and the results of the government's actions are not bearing fruit for everyone. We know, we have reports right now, there are more people living with disabilities who are using food banks. We have more people living in poverty. We have more homelessness. We have more people not able to afford their first home. Last month, we had the media reporting 46% of Canadians are within $200 of financial insolvency. These are very profound facts that speak to the realities of regular Canadians. And a tax regime is just a part of the systemic issues that we've got to address. What about stock option loopholes? I haven't heard anything about how we're going to address actual problems in terms of how we're dealing with corporate bailouts, for instance. What about pension reform? These corporations need to be taking their responsibility to workers and their retired workers more seriously. And when we do talk about a tax regime, it is true that we will be supporting this tax regime with Madagascar, but it is very disconcerting and disingenuous to hear painting our economy with this healthy brush. A lot more work needs to be done. And what is next in line now for our tax regime that needs aggressive overhaul?
Before we go to a question, I just want to remind the honourable members in the House that the other day when we debated this topic or this bill, there was a lot of talk about everything but the treaty between Canada and Madagascar. So I'm going to ask the honourable members, whether they're giving a speech or asking a question, to try to stay on topic and be as relevant as possible. The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on the tangent, this model tax convention that was entered into and has been entered into by Canada and Madagascar is one that is modeled based off of the OECD model tax convention. The convention is expected to contribute to the elimination of tax barriers to trade and investment between Canada and Madagascar, to solidify economic linkages between the two countries, and it is similar to other models tax conventions that Canada has entered into with 93 partners around the world. To answer the other part of the honourable member from Windsor-Tecumseh's question, our government is not stopping We're working, we're running to make sure that all Canadians benefit from the growth that's occurring in our economy. We know that one person looking for work is one too many, and we want to ensure that they have the skills, or they have the skills, he or she have the skills to find that first or second job or transition from one job to the other. Individuals being helped out by the Canada Child Benefit. Now we'll have the introduction of the Canada Workers Benefit, which again is targeted at low-income Canadians. It's going to lift literally, I think it's nearly 100,000, I think the exact number is 75,000 people out of poverty. It's going to provide Canadians with additional hope. It's going to, along the lines of what our values are as a government, ensure that all Canadians are included in inclusive growth, and important that no Canadian is left behind in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions?